You know what? Said the doctor, stood in the transmit booth. Neither do I. He grinned. Ah, well, I think of something. And with a pop, he vanished. Martha sighed, and there was nothing to do but wait until he sorted everything out. She turned to join the party of humans and 3 badgers, and then she froze. Projected on the wall of the spiky peach was a badger pirate spaceship hung up, began to move. Tiny pirate capsules spewed from the back of the ship, each zipping around to attack the Brilliant head-on. They fired the weapons, and another screen to the left blared warning signals about the Brilliant's shields. Captain Georgina, Thomas, and some of the others' crew were racing to the horseshoe computers. Get the channel open. Georgina shouted, "Get a channel open." "Open, sir," said Thomas quickly, busy with the controls. "Archie," said Captain Georgina, "time for you to do your stuff." "Oh, yeah," said Archibald, hurrying to join the human crew. Captain Florence, he said, and Martha could see how awkward and scared he just speaking to the air. "This is, Archie, there's food here, good food." Thomas fused the controls, getting other static in response. And then the voice heard loud and clear. "Archie," said the very sounding Badger woman, "you're in big trouble." For a moment they stared at Archibald, who could only shrug. There's something smashing into the Brilliant, and the impact knocked them all off their feet. "Keep trying," shouted Captain Georgina as she scrambled back to the controls. "You gotta convince them." "Yeah," said Archie. Dashiell and Jocelyn, holding hands, joined him in the horseshoe computers as they all tried appealing to their former comrades. Captain Georgina signaled for the rest of the human crew. "We're going to be boarded," she told them. "Take your position, hold them from the engine room." "Sir," said the brunette. The doctor took our guns. It was true. A mess of broken weapons lay littered on the floor. Their innards used the building to almost the working test made. "Hell," said the Captain Georgina as she shoved Archibald aside and took his place next to Thomas. "This is Captain Georgina, Wet 11 of the Starship Brilliant." She told the attacking badgers. You are in violation of the Intergalactic Transmitter Code 6, 14, and 20, and you will desert your attack at once, or we will blast you from the sky." And with a pause, and for a moment Martha thought the defiance of the captain's tone might have made the pirates reconsider. "Ha," said the gruffled female voice they had heard before. "Bring it on." Again they were thrown from their feet. Something smashed into the starship, and again, "They're here," said Jocelyn from the ground behind Martha. "It's okay," said Dashiell. "We'll tell them." He led Jocelyn quickly to the bridge, through the door which was no longer black by scrambled eggs. They passed a fluttered Miss Wingsworth as they went. "Get the passengers out of here," shouted Captain Georgina. A couple of human crew ran to bustle Miss Wingsworth off the bridge, but Martha hurried over. "She's with me," she said, and again the ship buckled as something smashed into it. Human crew obviously decided that they had better things to do than worry about the passengers. Martha led Miss Wingsworth out into the crew's quarter, away from the panic. "More haste, less speed, I always say, dear," Miss Wingsworth said, rolling her eyes. "What has been going on?" "The doctor let us out of the time loop," Martha explained. "But now the pirates are attacking." "What, like those 3 deer?" said Miss Wingsworth. "Remember what they were like when they first got here," said Martha. Before Miss Wingsworth could reply, the wall exploded just ahead of them. Martha barely registered the smart car-sized capsule that had smashed aboard before she was lifted off her feet. The capsule-sized gash on the side of the ship grabbed out into the open space. Martha tried to scream, but the air was being sucked out into space just as she was. She flailed her arms and legs as she fell towards the hole. There was nothing to grab onto. Something yanked her ankles, and this time she managed to cry out, Twisting back, she promised Wingsworth, clutching her with one tentacle, the other gripping around a bunk of one of the human crew's beds. They both hugged in midair, and Miss Wingsworth's tentacles taunt the skinny of the strain. She glittered gold jewelry buckled and broke, pieces dancing into the air as they tumbled into space. "Oh, really?" said Miss Wingsworth, her teeth chattering as she fought to keep her grip. "They used to be my mother's." Martha struggled for breath as the hole on the side of the ship tried to swallow her. A human crew member and a pretty brunette tried to reach Martha's hand, but they brushed fingers and didn't quite catch hold. And then the brunette tumbled into the dark, starry vacuum as she fell out, but she hit by a fleck of the red jelly-like substance fast and sealed the hole behind her. Martha and Miss Wingsworth crashed into the hard floor for a moment, and the hole had been sealed. They lay there panting, and Miss Wingsworth grabbed Martha's ankle, dragging her into a small room with a bed in it, and she clung to. She slammed the small door just as the same time another capsule burst through the far wall. Martha hugged her as tight, and behind the closed door they heard the screams of yet more human crew members being sucked into space. The Brilliant lurched again and again as the pirate's capsule smashed into it. Martha felt sick and terrified, but it seemed to be so quiet now. On the far side of the door, she put her ear to the door, heard muffled shouting and shooting, and the Badger pirates were pillaging the ship. She desperately needed to know where the doctor had got to. He wouldn't leave them to die like this. She knew he'd come for her somehow. "You can't go out there, dear," squealed Miss Wingsworth. Martha hadn't even been aware of her hand working to unlock the door. "You've got to find the doctor," she said. "No, you don't," insisted Miss Wingsworth, and swept Martha away from the door with a tentacle like a tree trunk. "You're not going to do anything silly. We both have to." The door disintegrated in a sudden ball of pink light. Had Martha still been in front of it, she would have been obliterated herself. Miss Wingsworth whimpered as the helmeted Badger pirates stormed into the small room, prodding her with a gun. "You Marfa?" the Badger said bluntly, with a gruff female voice. Said Miss Wingsworth. "Might be, dear." The Badger pirate raised her gun to her. "No, wait," cried Martha from where she laid on the floor. "I'm Martha. Just leave this one alone." "Huh," said the Badger pirate. She reached down, grabbed Martha's arm with a hairy paw, and started dragging her out into the passageway. "Now, really," said Miss Wingsworth, began to protest. "Please," Martha told her as she taken roughly away. "Stay there, says Dave. You have to find the doctor." And then she rounded to the side of one of the capsules, could not see Miss Wingsworth anymore. The Badger pirates dragged her back into the Brilliant's bridge. The whole gang of Badger pirates awaited, the last three of the human crew kneeling in front of them, their hands clasped on their heads. Thomas, Captain Georgina, and a pretty red-headed girl were all that had survived. The rest, Martha realized, must have been shot or sucked into space. With the last three survivors were Archibald, Jocelyn, and Dashiell. Male Badgers were shouting at them, brandishing bent silver trays. "But Stanley," said Dashiell, trying to explain, "it happened. We ate the food, and then it was there again." Suddenly, it was about to say something when he saw Martha being brought in. "Good ones, Zusa," he told the Badger, gripping Martha's arm. "Put her with the rest." "But she's good," said Archibald quietly. "Shut up," snapped Stanley. Zusa led Martha over to the three human crew, and gestured her gun for Martha to kneel the same way they did. Martha did as she was bidden, taking her place between Captain Georgina and Thomas. Blood dripped from Thomas's handlebar mustache and wouldn't meet her eye. You don't have to hurt us," said Martha calmly. "Nah," said Stanley, coming over, "but we wanna." To prove his point, he cuffed Thomas across his face with a back of his paw, and leered at Martha, his breath hot and stinky in his face. But before he could hit her or hurt her, another badger came running in. "Yeah, Toby," said Stanley. "We got the drive," said the newcomer. "Huh," said Stanley. "Get back to the captain. We just gotta finish up here." "Ah," said Toby. "Can I watch?" "Get off," snapped Stanley. "Some's more important." "Right," said Toby as he hurried away. Stanley turned back to the prisoners. "Don't do this," Martha told them. "I got orders, ain't I?" said Stanley. "Yeah, but they don't own anyone," said Dashiell. "Ha!" laughed Stanley, but was a murmur from some of the other badgers. Martha dared to glance around at them. No one could see that they weren't happy with the three of the prisoners being badgers from their own ship. "You reckon?" Stanley leered at Dashiell. "Yeah," said Dashiell, daring to get on his feet. The other pirates still kept their guns with them. "We don't have to be slaves all the time." Stanley snorted at him, but clearly had no answer to this. He wrinkled his wet black badger nose, and Martha could see from the thinking this position was over. Then, without a fuss, he raised his gun and shot Dashiell squarely in the Dashiell screamed as pink light engulfed him. "Dash!" cried Jocelyn, but before she could move, Archibald had grabbed her, stopping her from getting shot herself. The pink light died away and Dashiell's body toppled over onto the floor. "Ha," said Stanley. "That's bad, Stanley," said Archibald, hugging Jocelyn as she sobbed into his shoulder. "Yeah," said Stanley. "Captain Florence ain't gonna be happy with him. You flew off before you was told." So thought Martha. They explained why only 3 badger pirates had gotten aboard the Brilliant at first. Dashiell hadn't been able to wait. "Dash said we'd get the spoils," said Archibald quietly. "I know that," said Stanley. "He was a cheater. We all have to wait till she says go. Otherwise it ain't fair." "Yeah," said Archibald, "but—" "No but," snapped Stanley. "Captain Florence wants to see you and Joss. Tell you off herself." Martha saw Archibald and Jocelyn both shiver with terror at the thought of whatever punishment their captain might have in store for them. "And you gotta take that one, too," said Stanley, wagging his gun in the direction of Martha. "Me?" she said, horrified. "Why me?" "Archie's been telling us stuff about ya," said Stanley. "You put stuff in his head." "What, the canopy?" she said, trying to sound surprised and innocent. "It's just a bit of food." "Yeah," said Stanley. "And now look at what they're like." Martha looked over at Archibald, who grinned and waved at her. They seemed to remember where she was and put his paw slowly back on top of his head. "See," said Stanley. He waved his gun at the rest of the prisoners, teasing them as to who he'd kill next. And then he shrugged. Get him up." The other badgers came forward for the prisoners, Martha and the human crew. Archibald and Jocelyn got slowly to their feet. The 3 of them other humans were bruised and bloody where they had been knocked about. Captain Georgina still looked like she had been modeling for some glossy magazine, though. She stood taller than the badgers, and looked in her eyes showed that she would not be intimidated. "Take your own lot," she said, "but you'll leave Martha here with me." "Yeah," said Stanley, "but you're all gonna die, ain't ya?" He turned and shot the horseshoe of computers, which exploded in pink flame. "No," shouted Katrina, and ignoring the other badgers and their guns, ran over to the blazing pink bonfire that had been the command. When she turned to face the badgers again, her eyes were terrible to see. Stanley glared at her like she just had been given him permission to kill her. "Captain," said Martha carefully, "you should have come back over here. You're still a prisoner. Stanley will show mercy." "Ha," said Stanley. "Mercy." He raised a gun. "You're not going to get away with this," shouted Katrina in majestic calm. "Yeah, I am," said Stanley, and he shot her. Katrina didn't cry out as the pink flame engulfed her. Martha, horrified, thought that she might even provoke her own death, rather than be taken prisoner. Everyone else seemed utterly terrified at what might have happened to them at the hands of Captain Florence. Right, said Stanley, and he led the Badgers to their prisoners off the bridge and back to the capsules. Martha was forced into the back of one of the capsules, squeezed in between Stanley and another Badger called Kitty Rose. It was like being in the back of her brother's car. Her knees were up to her elbows, and no room to even breathe. Through the windows, she saw Archibald being squished into the back of another capsule further along the passageway, and Jocelyn escorted to another. Thomas and the pretty red-haired girl remained standing in the passageway, looking unsure what to do. "You're not going to take them?" asked Martha as the capsule door closed. In front of her, Stanley chuckled at the readings on the dashboard in front of her, checking that all the other pirate capsules were ready to go. "Nah," he said. "I thought," struck him as he leaned around in his seat to leer at her again. "Gonna show 'em mercy?" He stabbed a button in the controls in front of him with his hairy paw. The capsule leaped backwards, smashing out of the side of the Brilliant and into the vacuum of space. Martha smacked her head back in the capsule as she recovered herself from the starship falling away from her. The wired steel sailing ship was glittering solar sails. In the hull of the black tea with red patches as the Badger capsules had torn through it. Martha watched the other capsules tear out from the Brilliant. From the hull of her own capsule had just made, she saw Thomas and the red-haired girl clutching each other tightly as they tumbled into space. Stanley and the other Badgers, Kitty Rose, worked with the simple controls of the capsules, turning slowly around from the spiky peach of the pirate ship. Stanley dumpty-dumped his way as they made their way forward. When she'd seen on the screen aboard the Brilliant, Martha had no idea the scale of the pirate ship, but it was enormous. The spikes weren't guns, but narrow towers, blocks, each of the size of the hospital she used to work in. She realized there must be thousands and thousands of Badgers aboard. It is less a ship and more a moving city. Still humming to himself contentedly, Stanley steered them around into the vast hangar at the back of the ship, where thousands of identical capsules sat waiting. They parked in the free space about a mile into the hangar, and Stanley patted his thighs in time with the humming while he waited for a signal from the controls on the dashboard and said it was okay to get out. Martha prized herself out of the cramped back seat, and her knees and elbows aching. Stanley shrugged at her discomfort. The other Badgers emerged from their capsules across the way, pounding Archibald and Jocelyn forward with their guns. Archibald grinned at Martha like it was all a game. "You can see where I got made," he told her. "Nah," said Stanley, "you got other stuff to do." The captor led their way to the almost golf cart, which whined and weird as it took them to the end of the huge hangar and dropped them off at the lift. Stanley hummed again and waited for the lift to arrive. On the other Badgers recognized the tune and dared to join the humming. Stanley glared at him, and he quickly stopped. Spacious lips seemed to go sideways as well as up and down. Martha tried to make sense of the complex instructions Stanley gave it, and still sure she was able to escape somehow. They stood in awkward silence as the lift rushed them upwards and along. Stanley and the other Badgers seemed to itch with excitement about what they were going. Whatever Captain Florence had in store for her prisoners, it would, Martha realized, be entertainment for the other Badger pirates. Eventually the lift came to a stop and the doors slid open with a ding. Sweet and spicy air wafted in them with a mix of porta-pruny and curly. Stanley beckoned his prisoners forward and Martha stepped into the passageway of the hanging scales and incense. Not at all what she expected on any kind of spaceship. As she proceeded down the corridor of pungent hanging scales, Martha glimpsed a frenzy of activity going on out of view. The scales of the badgers of various loose-fitting, sweaty clothes, as those bruised themselves with banks of complex controls. They were, Martha realized, on the bridge of the pirate ship, but the captain here had tried to make it look homely. At the end of the passageway, in a great view and gallery, looked into space, looking up at an angle Martha could see the starship Brilliant. She could never get used to space being three-dimensional. In front of the window, silhouetted by the stars, stood a dreaded Captain Florence. "Captain," said Stanley, hurrying over. He hung his head and his whole body bowed to her. "I done as you asked," he stammered, "and I brought your prisoners." Captain Florence slapped him so hard across the face he skidded over the floor. "Speak," she said, her voice rich and husky. "When you're spoken to, be hearty." She turned to see the prisoners that had been brought. Martha gasped as the captain stepped into the light. Captain Florence stood taller than any of her pirates. She wore a loose colored blouse, and a bristly arms were taut and muscular. She had spent her whole time working out. A jagged scar worked across her forehead, dripped behind an eye patch that had continued down her hairy cheek. Said Martha, "It's very nice to meet you." Captain Florence looked at her slowly up and down like a butcher might apprise a fatted cow. She clicked her paw out. "Dillon," one of the badgers working behind the hung scales, and turned back to the Brilliant. Watched the Brilliant, perfectly framed in the middle of the great bay window. Said Martha, as the badgers, one of them, Dillon, ran out behind her, doing whatever they'd been bidden. She heard paws working on the keyboards and the levers being pressed. And then the brilliant white beam of light struck out from underneath and blew the Brilliant to smithereens.